Top story that we are following here on India Today, the report that everyone was eagerly waiting for. The Air India crash initial report is now out. The probe says the fuel supply to engines was in the cutoff mode. Fuel cutoff switches went off in 1 second. Both the engines shut seconds after takeoff. Fuel switch cutoff led to the crash. Cockpit recorder reveals pilots were confused. No bird strike found in this crash. My colleague Ahmedabad is now joining me on the story. Ahmed, this is the report that everyone was very eagerly looking forward to. Unfortunately, from what we are understanding, the initial reports are pointing towards the fact from runoff to cutoff. The switch went off in just 1 second. The recording also shows that both the pilots were confused.
Well, Aishwarya, this is extremely technical report that has come out and filed by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, and we have to look into each of these details with much sensitivity. 241 people who were on board lost their life. It is possibly one of the worst civil aviation accidents that in the world as well as India. In India. So now if we go by, breaking it down, the report, technical report for our viewers. Like your car, aircraft also have fuel switches. And right after the takeoff, what happened with AI-171, the Boeing Dreamliner, is that the engine fuel switches transition from run position to cutoff position, which essentially means that the engine was not getting the fuel that it was required, for the acceleration. And that is why right after the takeoff, what we could see in the visuals was the flight started to deaccelerate, and instead of having an elevation, it was actually falling down. So one point is that within difference of 1 second, the fuel switches for both the engines, not only one engine, both the engines transition from run to cut off. And that is when the pilot asked his co-pilot, why did you switch off the fuel engines? And he responded, I did not, which indicates that this was possibly not manually done. Was it because of some technical error within the Boeing Dreamliner? That is a big question that the investigative agencies will take it forward from here. Number two is that, there was, as you mentioned, there was no butt hit. But it is to be noted that the entire life of AI-171 was of 94 seconds, Ashwarya. Right from the moment of takeoff from Ahmedabad airport to that elevation that it achieved, within 94 seconds, you had all of this conversation happening within the cockpit, and eventually AI-171 first hitting the trees around the Ahmedabad airport, and then the chimney of the army establishment there before landing on the BJ Medical College hospital building, and in which 241 people on board died, and so did people in the complex as well.
Ahmed, one of the crucial things which, from what we understand at the moment, will be asked is with regards to the failures, the mechanical failure that we are seeing, because the initial report obviously pointing towards the fact that the pilots did not understand what happened before they could even react. In the visuals also, it was pretty clear that just after takeoff, immediately after takeoff, the crash happened. So that's also something which Boeing specifically will now have to look into.
Well, Ashwarya, it is very important to note out here that not only AAIB, that is Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, which is the nodal agency in India to investigate accidents of this sort, is taking forward this investigation. But even the international community domain experts have been roped in. So the NTSB, which is the United States domain expert agency for this kind of accidents, was immediately roped in. They have been given the status of accredited representative in this particular case, so that they are able to get and gather every aspect of the accident and investigate and assist AAIB. What the NTSB has done is that they have gotten the experts from GE, because the engine of Boeing Dreamliner was from GE. And the Boeing experts have been roped in by the NTSB, and so has been the FAA experts, included in that particular team. So yes, whether this fuel switch, problem which led a transition, which actually led to the crash, was part of Boeing's, technical problem, And because this is part of one of the red flags that was actually done by the FAA back in 2018, that there is some problem with the fuel switches of the Boeing of model 737. And it was also flagged that this similar model was being used, fuel switches models were being used for part of 787 Boeing Dreamliner, which this flight was. So this was flagged by FAA in 2018. And whether Air India conducted those audits or not, all of that is under question. But at this point in time, the AAIB initial report is not blaming either Air India or the pilots or the manufacturers, because again, remember, this is a really big concern for India and across the world for the civil aviation industry. And if there are problems which are immediately indicating towards problems with Boeing, it will be flagged. It has to be flagged so that no further unfortunate and tragic incidents happen elsewhere in the world. But as of now, the AAIB has not recommended any action against either Air India or Boeing in this particular case. So this means that the entire issue is for further investigation as to why those fuel switches transition from run to cut off, whether it was due to a mechanical manual problem, or whether it was part of the
Right.
technical glitch within the craft. This is matter of investigation at this point in time. Ashwarya.
Let's break down for our viewers what exactly happened and what this initial report at the moment is pointing towards. This is the Dreamliner crash. The initial report is revealing both the engines shut down within seconds after takeoff. This is something which is very, very scary. The RAT has been deployed, indicating complete power loss. Pilots deny initiating the fuel cutoff switches. In fact, from what we are understanding, both the pilots even had a conversation. Engines tried to reignite but failed as it was too late. The crash took place just barely 32 seconds after the liftoff took off. Thrust levers found idle. Data shows that there was no thrust at all. There is no bird strike that we are looking at the moment, no bad weather condition. That's something that the initial report at the moment is pointing towards. The fuel tested is clean. There is no contamination found in the fuel. The crew was experienced, it was medically fit, and it was well rested. Possible fuel switch fault not inspected. That is something which at the moment is being investigated, that there is a possibility that the fuel switch, this fault, was not inspected before the plane took off. So this is something that we are now understanding is now coming out. My colleague Amit is still with me. Amit, one of the things, and this is the last point that we are now emphasizing, is the fact that the fuel switch fault is something which was not inspected before the flight took off.
All this angle, as I mentioned, Ashwarya, will have to be investigated further by the AAIB and the foreign experts who have been roped in for this particular issue, as well as the experts from the civil aviation industry and the components, such as, for that matter, as you speak, because we are also pointing out at the fuel switch issue. And that is why OEMs, which is the original equipment manufacturers, they were already roped in by the AAIB and the agencies responsible for the investigation. So what I have been given to understand that at near the Ahmedabad airport, all the wreckage parts that were recovered from BJ Medical College hostel campus, all of that was taken to a spot near Ahmedabad airport, and the wreckage has been reconstructed into AI-171 Boeing Dreamliner craft, and the OEMs, which is the original equipment manufacturers, have been called in. Now, why that has been done is that each of these manufacturers will actually look into the components that they supply for the Boeing Dreamliner, and will check within themselves whether there was some technical fault with their own component, and that will help the agencies to actually identify whether this was a manual issue or a technical glitch or technical problem that led to the disaster. And at times, is it an independent issue whether those fuel switch transitions happened on its own, or whether they were contributing factors for it, other equipments that could have actually contributed, faults in other equipments that could have actually contributed to this particular tragedy that happened. All of that will be investigated by the agencies henceforth. But we need to also relook at the timeline. of AI 171. 94 seconds, Ashwarya. The craft takes off from Ahmedabad airport. The ATC is informed about it. And then suddenly the pilot and the co pilot realize there's a transition in the fuel switches, which essentially means, again, breaking it down for our viewers. It is like your car, if you suddenly put off the switch of fuel to cut off, that would mean that your car engine is not getting the fuel that it is required. And instead of acceleration, it will begin accelerating, and in this particular case, it was in the mid-air when that happened. And that's when the pilots started to call Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. It has been announced twice by these pilots to the ATC Ahmedabad, which we had also reported during the crash when I was on the ground, along with India Today's extensive team, reporting on every angle of the crash, the tragedy that unfolded on June 12th. And immediately, I think after 6 seconds of Mayday call, the crash happened. And what happened in between is the craft hitting the trees, then the chimney in the army establishment, and eventually landing on the building of BJ Medical College hostel, killing 241 who were on board as well as the people on the campus. So as of now, as I also mentioned, Ashwarya, the AIB report is not, holding anyone responsible at this point in time, or suggesting some action against Air India, or for that matter, Boeing in this particular case, because it's a Boeing craft that
Right.
had met that unfortunate tragedy in Ahmedabad. So we'll have to wait for several months from now, because, in all honesty, it takes at least around 8, 9 months for a full-fledged report in cases of this sort. What is fortunate in this case, Ashwarya, what I can certainly point out is that the black boxes, both the black
No.
boxes, whether it be the one in the front or one in the tail, both of them were in a state that it could be actually decoded easily. The initial analysis process is already over. But I also can tell our viewers at this
Right.
point in time, a special technical equipment was actually flown into India by NTSB in order to download the memory module from the black boxes and begin this analysis of the data. That is why you have much more detailed report that has been put out by the AAIB. Back to you.